Ben, I want to say thank you for coming on.
If you come up with 10 ideas and 9 of them don't go the way you want, but then one of them goes even further than you could have ever imagined, it was so worth doing the ones that didn't work.
Absolutely.
Because you've still progressed. Oh, you don't need to thank me, it's a pleasure. It's a bit weird though. I'm usually the guy sat over there that's controlling the cameras and stuff, but today, this is what I look like. So
for everyone watching, this is Ben.
I've had a fresh haircut just for this, you know. So, yeah, I'm excited. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So we're into third series now.
Yeah, I think we've done 11 or 12 episodes so far. So,
yeah,
here I am. You could do a calendar of all the guests, and I could be Christmas, because why not?
So we just make you Christmas. So when we look at this, let's look at it. Okay, so a couple of things, and I want to do this one differently, right? We've been talking about the future of work, but what does it mean for someone who is our future?
It's a strange one, because I've heard obviously lots of different conversations, not just this week, but over the past few series. And I'm not going to lie, I haven't always understood what's being said, because it's not my area. Yeah. I'm obviously a very creative person. So for me, whenever I think about the future of work in my industry, I've always looked at stuff like AI and robots and whatever you want to call it, as kind of, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that because the creatives are always going to be needed. So there's always going to be a job for me. But I'm sure we'll get into it. But recently there's been loads of developments in my world where there's been use of AI and automation and all sorts that isn't only doing a job that I might do as an editor or a videographer or a director or whatever, but it's actually doing it better than I've seen a lot of people are employed to do it. So I think to sum up in a sentence what the future of work in my industry, because that's all I can really speak for, is probably a hybrid approach. Because I don't think you'll ever get creativity out of AI or a robot, but we can get into that because actually I suppose already I've contradicted myself there. But I think there's a lot to be said for the improvements that stuff like that can bring as well, which is interesting.
It is, isn't it? And I went to this event 2-3 weeks ago, and the guy stood on a stage, big expert in this area, deals with leaders all around the world, and he said, the reason why I don't think we should be scared is we didn't go to the moon alone. We went with machines.
Yeah.
And that's had such a profound effect on me because, you know, there are times where someone would say, hang on a minute, in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, a coaching app can do what you do. And there is a bit of fear that goes with that, right? And just like you were saying about the whole camera stuff.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is you can't ever teach a machine that emotional intelligence. The intelligence piece, yes. The emotional piece, no.
Yeah. I like to think of it in terms of, let's just use the camera world as an example, because that's what I know, right? So a shot on Sky News, ITV News, whatever, is always going to be the same. You've got the presenter, fairly standard, torso up at a desk, easy. AI could easily go, frame the camera up for that shot, right? But when you're making something like a thriller or, you know, a feature film that's really driven by the narrative, I think there's a lot to be said for the visual language in the way that's shot. So I think the creative element of a director's mind shooting that will always come up with new innovative ways, right? That's why we have stuff like the Oscars and all sorts of awards and reviews and stuff to talk about films that have been made in a new innovative way. And I'm not sure whether that type of role should be worried about whether that's still going to be around, because there's always going to be new ways of doing things. And from my understanding, I'm not, you know, a technological genius by any means, but I don't think that an AI could do that without someone having to do it first, right? Like, you have to build an AI. That has to come from somewhere. There's AI now that can take pretty dodgy audio and make it sound really, really clean, but someone's had to teach the AI to do that. So I think there'll always be, you know, like you say about people being worried that an app might come along and take their job. I think that's a worry for everyone in whatever industry, right? Like you go to Tesco, the machines like have replaced till staff. Now there's probably 4 tills in my local Tesco, but there might be 20 self-service. The good people will stay, right? Surely, or find new roles. Like it's not going to overtake everything. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's my input.
Well, it does, because when you think about what Adele said to us the other day, when she said that McKinsey report, 800 million jobs will be gone by 2030.
I think so, yeah.
And then the other side of that is, well, let's look at the jobs that are going to be created. Because actually, the whole thing, to your point about sound, that could get really complicated.
Yeah.
That could then be a degree in itself.
And you still need someone to record that dodgy audio in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Or be creating the technology that's then used. It might not be, the way it was now. I mean, you can kind of look at it in a different way in that, we were saying the other day about how you can't stay an expert forever, right? You might have had a film photographer 20 years ago who doesn't even know how to use a digital camera now. Doesn't mean that they aren't great at what they do photography-wise, but things change and you have to kind of change with them. So you might be a great cameraman now, but that doesn't mean in 20 years when AI's running the show and I've been proven wrong and they're the ones making the films, that you aren't creating the systems that AI uses, right? Because you're still going to have the brain for this is how it should be.
Exactly.
You might just be teaching something how it should. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing, we know that if you get your food delivered now, well, that job didn't exist and that whole sector didn't exist like it does now today. And let's stay with the film industry and using that analogy. Back in the 1920s, you had a little camera and you did that?
Exactly.
You had the little brownies.
Yeah.
Look at your cameras, how they've evolved.
But then, back then, there might have been 10 people operating a camera, right?
Exactly.
And now it's like, if we go on a shoot, I'll do the sound, the visuals, sometimes the directing, everything. So already, technically, I've taken a few jobs there. But there might be more people doing that than there was before. So I guess things just change. I'm not sure what the future is because camera technology is already like pretty great now. I mean, everyone's got £1,000 camera in the pocket in the phone. I mean, you won't ever hear me actually say that's like seriously because my camera's always going to be better than your phone. Sorry, guys. But I feel like it can only be pushed so far now. I mean, you look at stuff like 4K and it's like, I think there's been studies that only a certain percentage of people can actually tell the difference between HD and 4K. So if they push even further than 4K, you're not really going to be able to tell the difference. It's already going to be super high definition. So I think the improvements in camera technology are going to be more of the AI supporting, or not even AI, just, systems supporting the creatives with what they're making. So, as I said before, like sound enhancement, maybe being able to like scan a room and recommend, optimal positions for lights or whatever. I think that is probably more where we're headed because I just don't really see how cameras could get much better, to be honest. I mean, stuff like battery life, batteries are pretty poor, but that's not the point, is it? Like,
No.
You're always going to have to do that. But I think in terms of what we create with, we're pretty close to as good as it's going to get without, like marginal improvements.
Yeah.
I always say that about phones as well. If you look back 10 years ago, every year when they release a new iPhone, it'd be like, this is like insane compared to last year. Whereas now I feel like when stuff like that gets released, it's just, marginally better because we've already kind of pushed how far you can get into like a little piece of metal, right? So I think, again, I've gone on a tangent here.
Yeah, but you've gone on a really good tangent. So I'm going to bring you round to phones and then how all of this could potentially work. So when the phones first started, and I'm old enough to remember that in terms of the mobile phone, they were bricks, right? They were these massive things you carried. You then had a phone that you'd put in the middle of your car on the glove box and you'd pick it up.
Yeah.
And you dial. Can you imagine if you did that today? To where we're at now.
Yeah.
To where it's got a computer in it, to where it's got the AI in it, to where it's, and, Siri can run your life for you if you like.
Yeah.
there are other apps, obs. But my point is, it's then how we use that. So you and I, whenever I'm up here, kind of talk about personal branding, we talk about life, obviously. But within that, all of this is going to help the smaller businesses to be able to raise their personal branding. Yeah. So that in itself creates another sector, if you like. I mean, who knew that 10 years ago, say a business coach or an HR consultant or a learning and development would come into a studio to film a podcast just to continue to connect and stay relevant. So maybe it's not the technology, maybe it's how we use it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a guy called Ali Abdal who does a podcast. He's quite fascinating, actually. He was a doctor with the NHS and just one day decided, don't want to do this, I want to be a YouTuber. And he's really successful now. I think his podcast is quite similar to the Diary of a CEO type thing with Stephen Bartlett. And he put a Twitter thread out probably about a month ago now. I can't remember what the thread was on, so you'll have to excuse me. But a couple of days later, he came out and said, by the way, this entire tweet thread, which had gone viral, it had received 1 million views or something like that, was entirely written by AI.
Wow.
Now, on first thought, that could be quite a scary thing, right? Because why will we even need people if AI can write a post that can do better numbers that, I've certainly ever got on any of my posts.
Wouldn't mind that part, actually.
But I think there's also an argument that then that's just going to push people to be better. Because if an AI can do something decent that anyone could do, then you're going to be like, okay, I'm really going to have to improve it. So yeah, I think, like you say, loads of people would be able to use that AI to put out their standard LinkedIn post, save them half an hour a week or whatever of drafting and writing blogs. But then I feel like the people that still go to that effort to improve will then push themselves on. So I think there's a place for both, really. I think it's good to have the AI support, whether it is with production or with copywriting or with getting your milk at Tesco. But I bet if you actually did the stats on what takes more money, it would probably be someone that's rapidly scanning the till, right, at Aldi than it would someone that's struggling with the machine and whatever. Just because they don't have to pay the machine a wage, it might not necessarily be the most profitable way. So I think that's a good way of looking at all of it, really, is, just because something's come along that might be able to do your job doesn't mean it's going to do it better, and doesn't mean you can't improve and be better than it. Yeah. So I think it's exciting, all the different ways that we're going to be able to use stuff like this in the future. But I don't think that it should mean people get complacent with what they're doing because a machine can do it, because that's when you become replaceable, right? You need to still be offering value and coming up with new things and being creative. But if you can be supported by stuff, that's great. Everyone wins because you can put your focus into those areas that they can't do. Whereas if you just, use AI for 2 hours to do all your work and then just sit off the rest of the week, well, you've kind of proven your own point that you are replaceable. Exactly. You need to be working in ways that show that you aren't. That's my 2 pence.
And I think that's what we've learned this series more than any other. Because series 1, we did a lot about talent, didn't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's happening with that? Roles changing. We've been talking about Lisbon University now has that TikTok course. Amazing.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that's a brilliant thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, TikTok is massive. I bet if I pulled out... Have I got my phone on me? No, but I reckon if I pulled out my phone now, it would probably say at least... I don't want to admit it, but probably... I want to say half an hour a day, but it's going to be an hour, right? TikTok is where everything's happening at the moment. So if you're doing a course in that and can understand the algorithm and how things get seen, what's to stop you going to any business and saying, I could get you seen by 1,000 times as many people as you're being seen now without even really trying, just by utilising TikTok. Going and doing a degree in that, it sounds silly because TikTok's a kid's app for dancing, right? But if you go and learn it and study it, it's an opportunity. It's not a kid's dancing app, it's an opportunity. And things like that are going to keep coming along. I did film and TV production at uni, And, arguably, like, is TV even a thing anymore? Like, I mean, it's Netflix now, right? YouTube. Like, every kid wants to be a YouTuber. No one wants to be, like, a TV star. Yeah. So I think stuff like that is brilliant, to be honest.
And here's the other thing that we were talking about. And I don't know when, but I know we've had a conversation about this. To your point about universities, with everything changing so quickly, why don't we have a subscription course?
Exactly. Yeah.
And we can dip in and out, because if it's gonna continue to change, what's after TikTok? Well, everyone's talking YouTube Shorts, this, that, and the other. Some will then say, well, how is this impacting how we work? Hugely, because it's impacting how we communicate, how we go to market, how we learn, how we connect, how we get prospects, how we win business. It impacts everything. But if it's moving so quickly, why don't we also, rather than look at just the technology with how we learn and how we deliver coaching and training and everything else, let's look at it as a whole. Why not have a subscription?
Yeah. I think the thing with universities as well, there's so much free knowledge. Obviously, I'm not saying if you want to be a doctor, right, or a surgeon, don't go on YouTube, follow some tutorials,
Please
and then go and do heart surgery, right?
Please don't do that.
But with loads of stuff, there's so much free information out there that you could get from reading books or whatever. I think the whole university thing needs to go out the window, to be honest. I think it seems silly to spend that amount of money, whether you're in the UK, the US, anywhere, to go and get a degree for something when you could, in theory, learn on the job at a startup. You could learn it yourself via, YouTube or a course online. And I think that university subscription model just is naturally the next step in online courses.
I agree.
Now, like, people go to Skillshare or Moment or all those websites where you can, learn, how to become a, superstar DJ, for example. Why would you go and spend £50,000 when you could learn the course, learn the basics, go and get a local club night, and then do that? Obviously, that's not the greatest example in the world, but that's one that I did. I didn't go to university and learn how to be a DJ, but within a year of teaching myself, I was DJing the biggest night at my university, 2 of the biggest nights at my university, on a Monday to Wednesday. And I think if you look at that and apply that to anything, apart from doctors, surgeons, etc., you probably could learn how to be, a manager or something like that from starting somewhere, learning the ropes, learning everything, and then progressing. I don't necessarily think university is as big as it needs to be, really. When I was at college, there was a big push to get everyone in. And looking back now, it's obviously because they got a commission and they just wanted the money from sending people to the universities. I don't necessarily think that's right. If anybody came personally for what I do now and said, would you recommend university? Well, what is it? 12? Is it 12.5 grand a year now? Something like that? Or 9.5 grand a year? So already it's, let's say, 30 grand before you've paid any interest, before you've paid your accommodation, your student loans, etc. Go to the bank, get a 5 grand loan, buy a decent camera, a decent set of lights, a decent microphone, stuff that is good enough that if you were to start getting small level work, it would look decent. Get on YouTube, get on Skillshare, get on wherever. You'll learn everything, I promise, if you stick at it, within 6 months, you'll know everything and more than what you would have done in a degree. And I reckon you'll have got some work that'll have paid off some of that 5 grand loan. But that 50 grand, and I know it gets written off when you're 50 or whatever the rules are, but that doesn't make sense to me. That's such an outdated way of thinking. Like, I'll go to university and get a degree. And whether it's, being a videographer or whether it's being like a manager of an office environment, surely, online learning and new ways of learning, including working in the job and supplementing that with extra continuous teaching or learning or whatever, whether it's in or out of the workplace, that's got to be better than university, right? And I'm sure universities will realise that and, like you say, come up with their own subscriptions. Because, I think that's something that needs to change, really, to be honest.
It does, because I think, if my memory serves me right, UK, £60,000 is the average UK debt.
Sounds about right. Is that just from university or?
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds about right. My degree was £9,000 a year when I went. That was 2015 to 2018. So that's 27,000 a year. And then the loan that they give you to pay your rent and live and stuff, I think that was like another 5 or 6 grand a year. So that's not far off 50, really. But then I went to uni up north. If you go down to London, you're probably looking at least double that for, being able to afford to live in London. That's a hell of a lot of money, whether you're paying it back or not, And there's arguments that sending people to university, it's just a stealth tax because it's just a percentage of your wage that comes out every month that they know is never going to pay it off. It's just extra money coming in. And obviously that's not the point of the conversation. But yeah, I'm not a massive fan of universities, if I'm honest. I think there's so many better ways that you could learn. And I think investing in those ways, whether it's the universities themselves or companies like Skillshare, where it's just like power to the people, really, isn't it? As a northerner, I'm always going to be like, everyone should crack on and do the best that they can for themselves. Everyone's only got one life, right? So crack on and do it. And yeah, I think moving to a subscription-based model for a university makes sense. I don't know how they charge for it, though, because they aren't going to want to say goodbye to like £3,000 every term, are they? Be interesting to see how that would work and how they'd compete. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
It's a brilliant idea. And my eyes... I haven't been to university, but my eyes were really opened when I went to Lisbon and went to the university there for that event. It was quite an American model. Big companies investing in the university, but the courses were really relevant to what's happening. Okay, so let's do a course on the climate and roles within there. Let's do a course on power and electricity and electric cars, and whether you agree with it or not, just having a better understanding of those kind of things. Leadership.
Yeah.
How do we manage a workforce that isn't going to be with us forever? We need to develop their skills. We don't actually yet know what some of their skills are. And we're not sure where technology is going. So there's all of these unknowns, but to have almost like this think tank environment where we start to think about it, use a subscription model, but then understand, and I keep banging on about this, if you've got the C-suite here running the companies and they can't keep up with change, they then go to HR leaders, they're not sure. What do? They then go to my client base. So all the independent HR consultancy founders, business owners, L&D, organisational change, anything in that people space, recruiters even. Unless that chain connects, one is going to continue to talk to the other and say, well, I don't know how to do this. Do you know how to do this? I don't know how to do this. Do you know how to do this? No, I don't know how to do this. And all of that starts with up here in terms of that thinking, right? And I think that's come across really this season, hasn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of, actually, this is what's known. All of this over here is not known yet. But let's think about it and put a plan in place as to what we do know.
Yeah.
And put a plan in place as to what we want. But every link in that chain needs to connect in order to stay relevant. And that's the thing I've really learned this series. Staying relevant.
Yeah, I think, like you say, that's obviously been something that's been seen regularly in the conversations throughout the series. And like I said before, right, with, the film photographer who now doesn't know how to shoot digital, he still knows what he's on about, but not in today's terms. I think there's a lot to be said for, you need to know what you do. You need to know what your business does. And then if you know that at the top, surely the trickle-down effect through everyone then will be on board. But if the people at the top don't know what they're doing or are doing things in an old way where the people at the bottom who are young, fresh talent might be going, there's well better ways we could be doing this, but they either are ignored or not listened to or just don't share that because they don't want to or are scared to or whatever. Things aren't going to progress. Things aren't going to stay relevant. Things aren't going to change, and change is coming. Everyone knows it, so you need to be ready and embrace it. In my opinion, there's no point just sitting around just thinking that what works today is going to work tomorrow, because it might, but is it going to work in 5, 6, 7 years' time? Probably not. If I think back 5, 6, 7 years now, like to what I was doing, if I'd have stayed at that the same, I would have got a job. Never mind, like, been competent or good or great one day at what I do. You always got to be changing and innovating, whether it's to actually get better or to move to a different way of doing things because things around you are going to change. That needs to happen, I think. And to not do that just seems mind-blowing to me. It sounds so obvious when you say it out loud.
And isn't it funny? And the other thread that came through loud and clear was everyone's agreeing. Very few people are doing it well, particularly in the SME market. They go into these events, they're hearing it, they get it, we need to change. But something you just said there has really resonated with me, which is you've got all these C-suite up here saying we can't keep up with change. We don't know how to. We can't keep up with how we need to now think about our workforce. We know we need to think differently about how we coach and train them. And we know we need to think differently about pay, benefits, how we talk about things, workplace. How is that relevant if you're working from your house? So all these questions that actually after all of these things you and I talk about, it's like, really? Well, what about that? But if you've got another generation coming into the workforce who've got ideas, what's that other app? It's One Foot, showing my age now. But there's this, other thing that you can put your hand or your foot or something on and make thousands. I can't remember what it is.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I'll look it up afterwards. I think I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, it's another app. But my point is, if you're lost up here, just listening to that diversity of the generations in the workplace, we just need to get rid of the word "you're wrong."
Yeah.
I think that's just got to go.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of no stupid ideas.
Yeah.
I don't like it when, someone isn't listened to just because whether it's their age or, experience or whatever. Someone might come in and be a better videographer than me and they've only known how to use a camera for 3 months. They might just have that natural thing that makes someone great. That doesn't mean because he's only been doing it for 3 months, I shouldn't be listening.
Yeah.
You should be able to recognise, you could improve there, but that's actually really good. I'm going to take that, or I'm going to, be inspired by that. I'm not a fan of any sort of disclusion, purely based on factors like that. I think it's wrong. And I think companies will pay for that one day in one way or another. If you've got a young, fresh marketing team that's got loads of ideas, but you only want to do things the old way because that's what worked for you before, history knows that it's not going to always work. And those fresh young marketing people are probably going to have gone somewhere where they are appreciated. So I think taking all ideas on board and trying different things as well. If you try something that doesn't work, guess what? We're all human, right? We all make mistakes. I've made a big mistake today. And you just got to go, do you know what? No one's died. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's fine. And I think that is to be commended, to be honest, in the workplace or, in your career. If you're coming up with stuff, if you come up with 10 ideas and 9 of them don't go the way you want, but then one of them goes even further than you could have ever imagined, it was so worth doing the ones that didn't work.
Absolutely.
Because you've still progressed. No one's going to remember those 9 failures or, disappointments or whatever the business term would be. But they are going to remember you as the person that took you from A to Z.
Yeah.
But if you don't do anything, you're never going to fail, but you're never going to go anywhere either.
And here's another thing.
And you can only go down if you don't do anything. You aren't going to go up from putting in no effort to improve.
Exactly. And here's another thing. And again, I heard it somewhere, one of my many trips recently. Why don't we have almost like a failure budget? or a testing budget. We talked about it earlier.
I call it the stupid tax.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a certain amount of money, which I'm not going to disclose because my stupid tax has been heavily depended on this year, where if I don't know, curb my car, blow the tyre, right? Shit, shouldn't have done that. But sign it to the stupid tax. You know you've got a certain amount of money a year that you can go, shit happens, right? It's shit happens money. And that's probably a good way, actually, of thinking about it, applying to a business as well. Things are going to go wrong. Do you want them to go wrong because you dared to try something, or do you want them to go wrong because you didn't and now you're fucked, basically?
And you wish you had.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a testing budget, isn't it? It's a testing budget. And it goes back to no one's got the answers, and that's okay. I get it when you've got a multinational and you're there responsible for billions of dollars worth or pounds worth of business, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in some cases.
Yeah.
Employees, I get that. That's a huge beast to try and change. But you've got small departments and pockets where you can start to lead that change and stay relevant. And there's one bit in my book that always stays with me when I'm talking to people about change and everything else. And it was the big storm with Storm Katrina when it came through and really hit New Orleans. So they brought in a military guy, right? And they brought him in because he had dealt with storms of that nature and that intent and the imminent danger of flooding. But it was dealing with the past. And where he dealt with that storm before was a completely different landscape. So when he went home that night and said, it'll hold for tonight, don't worry, that came from a good place. I'm not going to say he did anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong because people died. And, you know, you and I have been talking about accountability. It's a really delicate area. But my point to all of this was he used a past model to project forward.
Yeah.
That night, New Orleans went. A lot of people lost their lives. They lost their livelihoods. They were homeless. We all remember what a horrific time that was. It's a fairly dramatic example, but it's a good case, isn't it, of people continuing to say, oh, we did it this way. We did it this way. To your point, if we're open to it and actually listen and sometimes do things instinctively, then we can stay relevant and continue to build and grow, because there's a lot of opportunity that's also come across this season, I think. Loads of opportunity out there, loads of innovation. Look at what, you know, the conversation about VR, that was mind-blowing this season.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. And we wouldn't be having those kind of conversations if we were scared of the future. I mean, let's look at Blockbuster and...
Great shop. I'd love to go there. Oh, wait.
Exactly. Kodak.
Yeah. Oh, well, do you know what? I'll challenge you on that one. Kodak's making a comeback.
Is it?
Yeah, so they obviously produce the film rolls, right, that go in your 35mm, that go in your cameras. But because we're hipsters and cool, 35mm film is making a comeback, but no one can get hold of it because they sacked all the people that make it. So now Kodak have had to hire back all the people that used to make the film and ramp up production again. And, you know, whether it's just a trend or whatever, and then they'll hire those people back, the demand for film will go down and they'll have to go again. I don't know. But yeah, I do love film. But yeah, the point stands, obviously, you know, if you're not going to change, like, I think there's a famous story. Blockbuster was offered to buy Netflix for like...
Yeah.
Something stupid like pennies compared to what it's worth now. And they were like, that'll never catch on. I think there is a difference between, you know, playing ignorance because you just don't think it's going to happen, or recognising, yeah, this could actually happen. Why not get in first and make it ours? Which could have done really well for Blockbuster, right? Everyone could be subscribing to them for £15 a month or whatever it is now. But they're not subscribing to Netflix, and that's because they're the innovators. You know, something else was saying the other day is if you innovate and lead the way and create, I feel like you've almost got uncapped potential. If you then have to follow in those footsteps, you'll never be able to get ahead because you'll always be having to copy someone else's idea, essentially. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for forward thinking and trying to recognise what the future is before it is. I was playing with Lego and watching Nickelodeon at the time Blockbuster was around, so I'm not 100% sure what the internet was like, and I can understand why they would have thought this is stupid, because I can imagine the internet was really slow. I think I've heard people say if the phone rang, the internet would go off.
Yeah.
So I can imagine, right? Why would you want to be sat watching something on stream and then the phone rings because your nan's calling to see how you are, and then it just stops? That's annoying. But if you look at it from a way, well, this is early technology, it's going to get better. It would have been a smart acquisition. So yeah, I think thinking a lot, long and hard about the future of whatever you're involved in and what is likely to be the way for it to go is smart, and is probably the best way to ensure that you'll still be around as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is a brilliant place to wrap up Series 3.
I know what's coming. Netflix was dropped.
No.
Here's the question.
So, latest Netflix binge.
Do you know what? I'm actually not a massive binge watcher because I just can't sit still, to be honest.
No.
I just can't sit and watch anything. But what I would say the best... do you know what? I'm going to try and think, what was the last thing I binged?
It's a good news, isn't it?
Nah, I can't think of the last thing I would have binged, to be honest. But a great show on Netflix that you should binge watch is Daredevil, Elevator Pitch. It's about a blind lawyer who helps people in the daytime with the law who are, unable to afford legal advice or whatever. He's helping the little guy. But then when the law fails them, he helps them as Daredevil because, spoiler alert, he's blind, but that means all his other senses are heightened. So he's actually really good at fighting. So he's a vigilante type in the night times. So when the law fails the people, and so essentially, Matt Murdock, blind lawyer, helps people when the law fails them. Daredevil helps people when society fails them. And it's a brilliant show, three series long, and without doubt, my best TV show. You always hear Breaking Bad, you always hear, Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. Rubbish, in my opinion. Get on Daredevil. Brilliant show.
There you go. That's what Ben says. Do what he says.
Brilliant.
I do. Ben, thank you
for doing this. Thank you for having me. It's a bit different to be on Zoom, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's been nice. But yeah, it's been really interesting to listen to, loads of different opinions on all sorts. And I'm just glad that I've had an opportunity to share what I think in terms of the future of my work and where things are going, for me. But also, kind of where I think it's going for everyone as well. It's been really good. So thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you, Ben.
Anytime.